Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is of course Catmanjoe and welcome hopefully back to a brand new Minecraft guide on my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to get all 18 different armor trims in Minecraft, which if you don't already know are cosmetic customizations that you can add to your armor, allowing players to apply unique colourful designs to helmets, chest plates, leggings and even boots. Now this video will be sort of a compilation of my 18 different short guides on how to actually find each of the armor trims, so I do apologise in advance if there is some repetition, but nonetheless I do hope that this guide goes to help you find what you're looking for and hopefully you do enjoy it. So to begin, here's how to get the Sentry armor trim. First, you'll need to find a pillager outpost, which is a semi-rare structure that is inhabited by hostile mobs called pillagers. Now usually you'll find one of these outposts every several hundred to couple thousand blocks, making them rare to find in villages but more common than woodland mansions. However, if you don't want to spend a bunch of time searching for an outpost in your world, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless, when you do find a pillager outpost, your goal is to get to the top of it and loot these single chests, because there's a 25% chance of having 2 Sentry armor trims within it. Once you've got one of those trims, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 cobblestone. And now you can make unlimited of the trim. Next, here's how to get the Vex Armor Trim. First, you'll need to find a woodland mansion, which is a massive structure found in dark forests and pale gardens. Now usually woodland mansions spawn thousands of blocks away from the world's spawn point, but they can actually spawn at any distance, so a useful tip is to find a cartographer villager. The reason why is that some cartographer villagers will sell you woodland explorer maps, which will show you a section of terrain that contains a mansion, making finding one a little bit easier. However, if you don't want to spend a bunch of time searching your worlds, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which will allow you to enter the seed of your world and find where most structures are. Regardless of which option you choose, when you do find a woodland mansion, your goal is to look for 9 specific rooms and loot their chests, as each chest will have a 50% chance to have the Vex Armor Trim. These 9 rooms are the checkerboard room, the X room, the grey banner room, the wood arch hallway, the winding stairway room, the bedroom with loft, the clean chest room, the attic room, and lastly the arena room. Once you've got the Vex Armor Trim, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 cobblestone. And now you can make unlimited amounts of the trim. This is how to get the Wild Armor Trim. First, you'll need to find a jungle temple, which is an above ground structure found in jungle biomes built mostly of cobblestone and mossy cobblestone. Now jungle temples obviously generate in jungles, but it's important to note that they don't generate in all jungles. For example, they don't spawn in sparse jungles at all, and on Bedrock Edition they don't spawn in bamboo jungles even though they do on Java. An easy way to find jungle temples is to purchase Jungle Explorer maps, which are sold by desert, savanna and swamp cartographer villagers. These maps will show you a small section of terrain that contains a jungle temple, making finding one a little bit easier. However, if you don't want to spend a bunch of time searching your world, you can always use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless of which option you choose, when you do find a jungle temple, your goal is to get to the 2 loot chests inside of it, because each chest has a 33.3% chance to have the Wild Armor Trim. A useful tip to avoid wasting time is to break through the walls with the levers on them when you go downstairs to get quickly to all the loot. Now once you've got the Wild Trim, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 mossy cobblestone. And now you can make unlimited of that trim. This is how you get the Coast Armor Trim. First, you need to find a shipwreck, which is a structure found in oceans that resembles a sunken sailing ship. Now shipwrecks are usually common to find, generating in all oceans, and on rare occasions even generating above sea level nearby water, so you should be able to find one easily. However, if you don't want to spend too much time searching for one, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless, when you do find a shipwreck, your goal is to loot the up to 3 different possible chests inside of it, because each chest has a 16.7% chance of having the Coast Armor Trim. Once you've got the trim, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 cobblestone, meaning you can now make theoretically unlimited amounts of that trim. This is how to get the Dune armor trim. First, you'll need to find a desert pyramid, commonly referred to as a desert temple, which is an above ground structure built mostly of sandstone. Now desert pyramids generate in, you guessed it, desert biomes, but it's important to know that they do have a lower generation frequency in Minecraft Java Edition than they do in Bedrock Edition. So if you do play on Java or just don't want to spend a bunch of time searching for one, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless, once you find the desert pyramid, your goal is to loot the 4 hidden chests under the floor in the center that are protected by a TNT trap. The reason for this is because each of these chests has a 14.3% chance to have the Dune armor trim. Now once you've got the trim, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 sandstone block, meaning you can now make unlimited amounts of that trim. This is how you can get the Wayfinder, Razor, Shaper and Host armor trims. So first, before anything, you'll need to make a brush, which will require 1 feather, copper and a stick. Then you'll need to find some trowel ruins, which are buried structures that work as archaeological sites. Now trowel ruins are one of the most difficult structures to find because they mainly generate in heavily forested biomes and usually are only found when you stumble across random clumps of terracotta sticking out the ground. So if you don't want to spend a bunch of time searching for one, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. However, if you do want to manually search for a trowel ruin, I'd suggest flying low over snowy taigas, as the terracotta stands out pretty well against the snow. Regardless, when you do find a trowel ruin, you're going to want to slowly dig around it and look for suspicious gravel, which looks slightly different from normal gravel. Then when you find some, use your brush on it, and if you're lucky enough, you'll get one of the 4 different trims, as each trim has an 8.3% chance of being extracted from suspicious gravel. Once you've got any of the trims, you can easily clone them by adding them to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 terracotta, meaning now you can make unlimited amounts of those trims. This is how to get the Ward and Silence armor trims. First, you'll need to locate an ancient City, which is the biggest structure of Minecraft that only generates underground and deep dark biomes at Y level -51. Now an important note is that ancient cities only generate under mountainous biomes like frozen, jagged and stony peaks, so when searching for one, mine under these huge mountains. However, if you don't want to spend a bunch of time searching for one, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless, once you've found an ancient city, your goal is to loot every chest you can find within it, as each chest, aside from the icebox chest, has a 5% chance to have the ward armor trim and a 1.2% chance to have the silence armor trim. Now if you want to loot chests without being killed by the warden, I suggest bringing a bunch of wool with you, and before you open up any chest, make sure you cover every skulk shrieker you can find near it. Then using your mother, break the skulk sensors nearby, as they are actually what tells the shriekers to summon the warden. This might take you a little while to do and seem like a lot of work, but trust me, it'll make looting the entire city so much easier. Once you've got one of the trims, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 cobble deep slate block, and now you can make limited amounts of that trim. Here's how to get the tide armor trim. First, you'll need to find an ocean monument, which is a rare underwater structure found in deep ocean biomes. Now, although they are supposed to be rare, you usually find an ocean monument without trying too hard, but if you want to make your life a little bit easier, you can purchase Ocean Explorer maps, which can be sold by cartographer villagers. These maps will show you a small section of terrain that contains an ocean monument, making finding one just a lot easier. However, if you don't want to spend any time looking for one, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless of what you choose, when you do find an ocean monument, your goal is to kill the Elder Guardians that spawn inside of it, as each Elder Guardian has a 20% chance to drop the tide armor trim. A useful tip is to bring a couple of buckets of milk with you to remove the mining fatigue effect that the Elder Guardians give, and a couple of water or even potions so you don't have to worry too much about getting air. Once you've got one of the trims, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 prismarine, and now you can make unlimited amounts of that trim. This is how to get the Snout armor trim. First, you'll need to go to the Nether and find a bastion remnant, also referred to as a bastion, which are large castle-like generated structures found in the Nether in all biomes except basalt deltas. Now, bastions generate in 4 distinct variants, the first being the bridge, the hoglin stables, the housing units, and lastly the treasure room, with each having unique layouts and dangers. Sadly, bastions can be a bit of a pain to find, so if you don't want to spend a bunch of time searching for one, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless, when you do find a bastion, your goal is to loot every chest you can find within it, as each chest has an 8.3% chance of having 1 Snout armor trim. As an extra bonus, you'll also have a 10% chance to find 1 Netherite upgrade template in all bastion chests except for in bastion treasure rooms, where you'll have a 100% chance. A useful tip before you try and raid bastions is to build up a couple of blocks high or secure yourself so that no piglings or especially pigling brutes can reach you, and then use a bow or crossbow to kill all nearby piglings. This is because opening any chest inside a bastion or even mining gilded blackstone will anger the piglings and make them all swarm towards you, so it's just safer to kill them first before you loot. Once you've got the trim, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 blackstone, and now you have unlimited amounts of that trim. Here's how you can get the rib armor trim. First, you'll need to go to the Nether and find a Nether fortress, which is a large structure found in, believe it or not, of course, the Nether, consisting of bridges, corridors, and towers. Now, Nether fortresses can be found in every biome in the Nether and usually generate every couple hundred blocks, so you'll likely not struggle too hard to find one. However, if you do, or if you just don't want to spend any time searching for one, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless, when you do find another fortress, your goal is to loot every chest you can find within it, as each chest has a 6.7% chance to have 1 rib armor trim. A useful tip to know before roaming around Nether fortresses is to bring plenty of food, preferably a shield, and if possible a long range weapon, so you don't have to worry about blazes or whether skeletons getting too close. Once you've got one of the trims, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 netherrack, and now you can make unlimited amounts of that trim. This is how you can get the Eye and Spire armor trims. First, you'll need to find a stronghold, which is an underground structure in the overworld where the end portal can be found. Now, to find a stronghold, you'll need to make a couple of Eyes of Ender, which require 1 blaze powder and 1 ender pearl each to craft. Once you've got a few, you'll just need to go outside and while holding an Eye of Ender, use it, which will result in it flying 12 blocks in the direction of the nearest stronghold. Your goal is to keep using the eyes and traveling in the direction they go until they eventually stop moving forward, and then dig down and you should find a stronghold. However, if you don't want to do that, you can use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures are. Regardless, when you do find a stronghold, you'll need to either search for an altar chest, as they have a 10% chance to have the eye armor trim, or search for the library room and loot the chest inside of it, because they have a 100% chance to have the eye armor trim. Once you've got the trim, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 end stone, and now you can make unlimited amounts of that trim. Now, if you're looking for the Spire armor trim, you'll need to look around the stronghold for the end portal and open it, and then go to the end. Once you're in the end, you'll need to find an end city, which is a tall structure found on the Outer Islands at a minimum of 1,000 blocks away from the end island. If you don't want to spend lots of time searching for one, you can use sites like Chunkbase, just like I mentioned before. Regardless, when you do find an end city, your goal is to loot every chest you can find within it, as each chest has a 6.7% chance to have the Spire armor trim. Once you've got the trim, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 per block. And lastly, this is how to get the flow and bolt armor trims. First, you'll need to find a trial chamber, which is an underground combat challenge arena that is made of mostly copper blocks and tough bricks. Now, finding a trial chamber is a challenge in of itself, as because they are underground structures, you'll likely never find one unless you're actually mining near one. So the best way to find one is to either purchase a trial explorer map, which can be sold by cartographer villagers and shows a small section of terrain that contains a chamber, or just use sites like Chunkbase, which allow you to enter the seed for your world and find where most structures structures are. Regardless, when you find a trial chamber, you'll either need to loot all the chests you can find within it, as you'll have a 6.3% chance to get the trim, or you'll need to use a trial key on a vault and you'll have the same 6.3% chance to get the bolt armor trim as a reward. Keys can be obtained by completing trials or just by looting the chamber itself, so they are quite easy enough to get. Once you've got one of the trims, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 copper block, and now you can make unlimited amounts of that trim. Now if you want to get the floor armor trim, you'll need to drink an ominous bottle, which you can get from killing pillager captains, inside a trial chamber. This is because when you drink the ominous bottle inside a trial chamber, you'll start an ominous trial, which essentially just makes trial chambers become more challenging, but if you complete the trial by killing all the mobs, you'll get an ominous trial key as a reward. Then if you take that ominous trial key to an ominous vault and use it, you'll have a 22.5% chance to get the floor armor trim. And once you've got the trim, you can easily clone it by adding it to a crafting bench along with 7 diamonds and 1 breeze rod. So yeah everyone, that was how to get every armor trim in Minecraft. If you did find this guide useful, please drop a like and of course share it with some friends. Also consider subscribing to the channel to help me reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers, as I would really appreciate it. But other than that guys, thank you all so much for watching and hopefully I'll see you later.